All right, guys, what's up? Good evening or night for some of you by now. Usually don't post this late, but the mock game wrapped up about half an hour ago, and I want to talk about what went down out there at Lumen tonight, kind of generally tonight, and then tomorrow I'll probably try to get into things in a little more detail, probably tomorrow morning. That's probably how we're going to do this. Um, Keep in mind that with the exception of like a couple of plays, these aren't things that people have seen. The only people who really saw what happened in that game were the people who were there. So all we can really do is pass along what other people have said. My guys that I was keeping track of: Brady Henderson, Corbin Smith, and Bob Condotta, basically. So, obviously, without getting to see these things firsthand, you can only go based off what other people say. But I do want to talk about some of the things that did happen. And this video is just kind of going to be about outlining the stars of the show tonight from what we were able to put together. So, obviously, first of all, the first thing that needs to be said is, with rare exception, it is the first team versus the second team. So you have your starters on one team and the backups on the other team. So it's a mismatch for sure. You would expect your starters to eat. You would expect your starters to do really well. And that seems to be, for the most part, what we did get. This game, the things that stood out to me, first of all, would probably be Metcalf. Metcalf had a big play on the first drive of the game, had a couple other good plays as well. He had one play that was broken up because the ball was a little underthrown, but Metcalf, it was reported in multiple instances, he was able to do some good things out there. And JSN. Those were the two big winners for me early on from this offense. JSN, right at the start of the game, first drive, caught like a 30-yard pass, got down to first and goal at like the 4-yard line. And then I think it was the very next play, he drew pass interference in the end zone. So I didn't hear a ton about JSN after that sequence, but that was a very encouraging start and a very good indication that we're going to see some of this hype translate to on the field stuff. Because again, the mock game is like the next step up after the training after training camp. So good stuff there. So the receivers in general, I think, were a bright spot from this game as near as I could tell. So that area, which looks like a strength of the team, looks like it's going to continue to be a strength of the team when the actual games start. Jake Bobo, if you're looking for somebody deep down the depth chart who looked really good, Jake Bobo was great, it sounds like. He made multiple plays. He caught a touchdown later in the game. I heard a lot of good stuff about Bobo from the reporters at the game. There was one shout out to, I believe it was Cody Thompson, converted a third and very long from Geno. So that's another guy who we forget about him maybe every now and then because some of these new guys are coming in and it's a little more exciting. Cody Thompson's battling for his roster spot as well. So I'd say the receivers in general were good in this game. As near from what we can tell from the reporting, I think I would single that out first and foremost. And Lockett, by the way, did not play in this game. There was a very minor injury going on, and they just didn't feel the need to get him out there. I mean, if there's anybody on this team that has nothing to prove in a mock game, it's Tyler Lockett, right? Probably more than anyone else. He doesn't need this. So that makes sense. So beyond the wide receivers, that to me was the main part that was positive on the offense. Offensive line looked pretty good too. It seems like there were a lot of penalties on the first team offense, but you would kind of expect that for a game that is so far away from the start of the actual season. You'll probably see something similar in the preseason games. There are just going to be a lot of penalties, but seems like the offensive line played fairly well. Geno and Locke both produced. They both did their thing. They both looked pretty good out there. Locke had to deal with a few drops from receivers. That was probably the one area in which the receivers weren't everything we wanted them to be. But overall, I would say that those were the things that stood out from the way this game was reported on offense. Defense, to me, the guy that got the most positive press coming out of this game was Boye Mafe. He had a sack. He had a second sack that was taken away by a holding penalty, which did get called. So that should have been another sack. It basically was. It was a holding call that creates a 1st and 20. So just as good as a sack. There were some other plays as well that got shouted out from Mafe. So Mafe looks like he has taken that step. He has taken that big step up to where he is going to be a well-rounded, high-quality starter. Obviously, in this game, he's going up against backups, but realistically, there are going to be points this season where he's playing against players that really aren't that much better than our backups. There are going to be some really bad teams that we play. So being able to excel against those lesser players is part of the process of becoming a really good player. Don't get me wrong. So that was great. That was the main thing that I really liked to hear from the defense. The other thing that stood out to me a little bit was Draymond Jones. Draymond Jones, couple different reports of him making big plays. He had a sack on Drew Lock. He had a couple other plays in the backfield or near the backfield. Obviously, again, going up against backups. But I was encouraged by what I heard about Draymond Jones. And I think the surprise, kind of the sleeper here, would be Artie Burns. Artie Burns played a really good, especially in the first half. He had 3 PBUs, made a lot of plays on the ball against our first string offense. He broke up a pass to Metcalf, had a couple, like I said, 3 breakups total in the first half alone. So Artie Burns, that if he's actually ready to at least be part of this team going into the season, that is what can create a situation where we can trade a cornerback and not really lose anything. Artie Burns is a veteran. He's been around for a few years. I don't think Artie Burns has very much value at all. A guy like Trey Brown, who's young and has potential and hasn't kind of already shown everything that he can be. Like, if the Seahawks end up deciding in a few months, or well, actually a few weeks, that they want to trade somebody like a Trey Brown or Kobe Bryant, who, by the way, was one of the guys who maybe didn't look so good in this game. He got beat up a little bit by Metcalf and a couple other plays as well. It looked like he got beat up. But if they want to trade somebody like Trey Brown or Kobe Bryant, or maybe even somebody we're not expecting, somebody like, it would be mainly those 2 guys, maybe Mike Jackson. I don't think it would be Mike Jackson. But if they decide to do that, one of the reasons why they could do that would be because they look at Artie Burns and they're like, if we need to break the glass in case of emergency because our defensive backs keep getting hurt, we've got this guy. This guy is good enough to replace an injured Mike Jackson, an injured Tariq Woolen, an injured Trey Brown, or whoever. And we got him for really cheap for this 1 year, and it allows us to have the freedom to maybe swap out one of these depth pieces on our secondary that actually has trade value because they're young, and we can keep Artie Burns around. So I'm keeping an eye on that, because the alternative would be to just cut Artie Burns, because I don't believe he has trade value. So that was promising. There were a couple injuries from this game. Main one was Kenny McIntosh. It doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but we need confirmation. And there was also our XFL cornerback actually got carted off at one point, so not great there. We're not super excited about that. Other than that, mostly seemed fairly clean, other than the stuff we were coming into the game with. So that's the quick and dirty rundown on this mock game. Tomorrow morning, I'll go into the minute detail of the reports that we got. But for now, see you guys later. Go Hawks.